So, as you all know, this week we got some encouraging news. The Republican healthcare bill is dead. For now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Republicans won't opt to just repeal the Affordable Care Act without replacing it, and it certainly doesn't mean that they won't try to revive this bill later down the line. So, the reason why this bill collapsed is because they just couldn't find enough Senate Republicans to support it. So, as a result, the Republican Party is currently engulfed in intra-party conflict, and Vice President Mike Pence, along with Donald Trump, took the time to scold all of the Republicans who didn't want to go against 88% of the American people who did not support this bill.
The Senate should vote to repeal now and replace later, or return to the legislation carefully crafted in the House and Senate. But either way, inaction is not an option. Congress needs to step up. Congress needs to do their job, and Congress needs to do their job now.
We have to repeal and replace Obamacare. We can repeal it, but the best is repeal and replace, and let's get going. This was the one we were worried about. You weren't there, but you're going to be. You're going to be there. Look, he wants to remain a senator, doesn't he? Okay. And I think the people of your state, which I know very well, I think they're going to appreciate what you hopefully will do. Any senator who votes against starting debate is really telling America that you're fine with Obamacare.
So what you see happening now is the vice president scolding Republicans who refuse to get on board. You see Donald Trump tacitly threatening to primary Republicans like Dean Heller, who refuse to support the bill. And the reason why they're so heartbroken that this draconian bill didn't pass is because it makes the party look grossly incompetent. It makes them look awful, because Donald Trump has now been president for nearly 8 months. Republicans have been in control of all branches of government now for more than half a year, and they have no accomplishments. They show that they are unable to govern. They can't deliver on the one thing they've pledged to do over the course of the last 8 years. So they know that this makes them look bad. And now, as a result, the party is imploding. They hate that they can't get this done. And admittedly, it is fun to watch. And my favorite part is that some Republicans are now beginning to admit that they are incompetent. So according to Raw's story, House Republicans are now publicly expressing their frustration with the party, as well as their worries about their future. At this point, we're a little incompetent, Representative Mark Walker told BuzzFeed of the party's failure to repeal and replace the Obama-era Affordable Care Act, despite controlling Congress and the White House. Others, like Representative Dennis Ross, were more unequivocal in their condemnation of the Senate's healthcare gaffe. The Senate has failed the American people and abandoned voters who were promised that they would repeal and replace the disastrous Obamacare. The House did its job. We honored our pledge and passed legislation to repeal and replace Obamacare in early May. There's no need to sugarcoat this. I'm very upset with the Senate, Dennis Ross wrote in a statement on Wednesday. If they ultimately end up not getting anything done, then you just put a bunch of vulnerable Republican House members on record for nothing, a House GOP consultant said on condition of anonymity. So overall, they look incompetent, and they know that they look incompetent. But what some of these House Republicans are complaining about is that, hey, look, we voted for this draconian bill that only a small portion of the American people support, and now that made us look bad for nothing because the Senate didn't go along and also do what we did and pass this draconian bill. But that's too bad. You voted for this because you chose to fall in line under a president that has no idea what healthcare reform can and should entail. He is doing this because he wants to appease the health insurance industry, and that's what you did as well. You voted for this bill, and now you look bad, and now you have to live with that. But the reason why this bill ultimately failed is because the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office scored this bill, and they determined that 22 million people would lose their insurance as a result of this bill. And now it's the case that the vice president as well as the president are starting to float the idea that if they simply repeal the Affordable Care Act right now, then they can just replace it later. So Trump stated via Twitter that, quote, Republicans should just repeal failing Obamacare now and work on a new healthcare plan that will will start from a clean slate. Dems will join in. Now, even though Donald Trump changed his mind less than 24 hours later, Senator Mitch McConnell is trying to revive the Obamacare Repeal Reconciliation Act, which is essentially an ACA repeal with no replacement. So, some Republicans are actually now considering repealing now, replacing later. So the Huffington Post explains that the Obamacare Repeal Reconciliation Act would, quote, eliminate the Affordable Care Act tax credits for private insurance, funding for its Medicaid expansion, the individual mandate that most Americans obtain health coverage or face tax penalties, the mandate that large employers offer health benefits to workers, and the taxes on wealthy people and healthcare corporations. Now, under this particular piece of legislation, the CBO scored it and estimated that 32 million people would lose their current health insurance coverage, and that includes 17 million people next year alone. So for all the Republicans who are now pushing for just a repeal without a replacement, now they're learning that that would yield even worse results, which is why some Senate Republicans are now scrambling to revive Trumpcare. So now as we watch all this chaos unfold, one thing is clear. Repealing the Affordable Care Act is much more difficult than the Republicans thought it would be. It's because, they know how to campaign, but when it comes to governing themselves, they have no idea how to govern. They just can't get things done. And this is because all of the legislation they're pushing is so unpopular. So now that the Republican Party is imploding and they are in shambles, the Democratic Party has got to capitalize on this moment of Republican weakness and collectively come together around single payer, because it's clear that a lot of Americans don't like what the Republican Party is doing. Even some of Trump's own supporters, even though they support Donald Trump by and large, they dislike his healthcare bill because, look, let's face it, it's draconian. It's just shitty overall. If you are pushing for a bill that would make people lose their health coverage, that's not a healthcare bill. That's an anti-healthcare bill. And a lot of people who even support Trump are beginning to take notice. But the goal here now is to end this debate once and for all and push for single payer. But will the Democratic Party come to their senses and actually do that? It seems unlikely, but for now, we can all breathe a little bit easier knowing that this disaster of a bill has been defeated. But look, let's not celebrate too much because this isn't the end of this bill. And if this bill fails, the American Health Care Act fails, we know there's going to be some other iteration down the line. We know that they're going to continue to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act without replacing it. Look, healthcare is under attack, and there's one solution. Single-payer healthcare.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.